Might Android users or people that might not be able to be on Clubhouse. We do this live stream. It's over on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube. Music Industry City will tell you more about that. musicindustrycity.com. And here's another thing that we started today is if you go to musicindustrycity.com, a there is a icon that says Clubhouse Info Center, and with that icon you can click on it and it takes you to these areas of where you can submit questions. So if, like, say if you're in one of the rooms and you have a question but you don't want to come to the stage or you can't come to the stage, you can submit a question there. Also, if there's news articles that you come across, you're like, hey, did you catch this, and maybe this might be something interesting to you, you can submit the news articles there. So let's get right into it. And Eli, I know we like to do something. It's this day in history. Want to take it away?
On this day in history, let's take it away. We're going to go ahead and talk in memory today about Kurt Cobain. On this day in 1994, Kurt Cobain committed suicide by shooting himself in the head at his home in Seattle. Cobain's body was not discovered until April 8th, but it was discovered by an electrician who had arrived to install a security system, who initially believed that Cobain was asleep until he saw the shotgun pointing at his chin. A suicide note was found that said, "I haven't felt the excitement of listening to as well as creating music, along with really writing, for too many years now." A high concentration of heroin and traces of Valium were found in Cobain's body. His death was officially ruled a suicide by a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. In memory, Kurt Cobain. Also in memory, on this day in 1998, British drummer Cozy Powell was killed when his car smashed into a crash barrier on the M4 motorway near Bristol, England. Powell had worked with the Jeff Beck Group, Whitesnake, Black Sabbath, Rainbow, Brian May, Peter Green, and the ELP spinoff Emerson, Lake and Powell. On this day in April 2002, American singer Lane Staley of Alice in Chains was found dead from a mixture of cocaine and heroin in his home. It was reported that the 6-foot musician weighed only 86 pounds when his body was discovered. His body was unfortunately partially decomposed when he was found. Medical examiners had to identify it by dental records. And on this day in 2012, we remember Jim Marshall, who made rock and roll so much more by inventing the Marshall amplifier. He died on this day in 2012 at a hospice in London. He was aged 88. Moving on, happy birthday today. Born in 1935, we celebrate Peter Grant, manager of Led Zeppelin. Known as being one of the shrewdest and most ruthless managers in rock history, Grant secured 90% of concert gate money and intimidated record store owners who dealt in bootlegs. Born on this day in 1965, Mike McCready, guitarist and one of the founding members of Pearl Jam. Born on this day in 1968, American singer-songwriter Paula Cole, happy birthday. And born on this day in 1973, Pharrell Williams, one half of the writing duo The Neptunes, and may I say, owner of one of the finest hat collections in the world. Moving on this day in history, April 5th, 1979, Duran Duran made their live debut at Lecture Theatre in Birmingham. On this day in 1980, REM played their first ever gig when they appeared at St. Mary's Episcopal Church in Athens, Georgia. The show at this abandoned church was actually for a friend's birthday party. On this day in 1985, over 5,000 radio stations worldwide aired the charity single by USA for Africa, "We Are the World." April 5th, 1998, the Spice Girls performed their first ever live UK concert when they appeared in front of a 9,000 person audience in Glasgow, Scotland. And finally, on April 5th, 2008, Apple's iTunes. Let us not forget what Apple Music used to be. On this day in 2008, Apple's iTunes overtook supermarket group Walmart to become the largest music retailer in the United States. Market research firm NPD said iTunes surpassed Walmart in January and February if 12 downloads are considered equal to the sale of one CD album. iTunes had sold more than 4 billion songs since its launch in 2003 by the time of this surpassing in 2008. And that's it for this day in history. Peter, over to you.
Right on. Thank you for that. Oh, it's, I totally forgot that, the Lane Staley and Kurt Cobain, I mean, these are the pioneers of grunge, of alternative, and that whole era. And you look at it, it's like we don't have any singers left except for, Eddie Vedder. I mean, and we're going to talk about Cornell. You know, Chris Cornell is. We're going to talk about his wife Vicky in the news coming just up on the block, and you know, it's sad to see that, like, you know, all these great, amazing singers and performers from that era are gone, and a lot to do with heroin.
Truly tragic.
Yeah. Well, and you know, and just remember iTunes. You know, iTunes saved the music industry, according to Steve Jobs. So that, you know, that there's that. We could That's a whole discussion in and of itself. So let's get into the news. What just wanted to say, you know, if there is something, a topic you'd like to discuss, feel free to just chime, like raise your hand. You can come up to the stage. We kind of just read for the first block. We read the news. We read selective pieces out of the articles, and you can kind of just kick back and just enjoy. And if you have something to say, feel free to raise your hand. I don't always see, and same with Eli, we don't always see some of the people enter the room because we're reading things. So if it didn't hit the invite button, just please raise your hand. We'll bring you on up to the stage. And we did add this thing to musicindustrycity.com. So if you go to musicindustrycity.com, there is a panel. It says Clubhouse Info Center. There is a form in there that you can submit news. If there is something that you see, like, hey, you know, this might be interesting, or you'd love to bring it to the table, there you can submit that article link there, as well as just raise your hand later and say, hey, I saw this in the news. So let's get to it. All right, and this was out of out of Rolling Stone and also Billboard, and they were updating this today. DMX, who was sent to the hospital a few nights ago. There is DMX. This title is "Prayer Vigil Set for Outside the Hospital, where rapper remains on life support." And the quote: "The family says, we ask that you please keep Earl, DMX, and us in your thoughts, wishes, and prayers, as well as respect our privacy as we face these challenges," they said in a statement. A prayer vigil will take place at a White Plains Hospital in White Plains, New York, where the rapper remains on life support. It'll take place on Monday, April 5th, and starting at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Rough Riders to the Rescue Foundation will host a vigil, while it was announced in a statement by DMX's family. It follows an impromptu gathering from Sunday, April 4th, when members of the Rough Riders Motorcycle Club, which licensed name from the label hip-hop collective DMX was part of, arrived at the White Plains Hospital to pay tribute to the rapper. In their statement also issued, one family said, "On Friday night, April 2nd, 2021, our brother, son, father, and colleague DMX, birth name of Earl Simmons, was admitted to the White Plains Hospital facing serious health issues. We ask that you please keep Earl, DMX, and us in your thoughts, wishes, and prayers, as well as respect our privacy as we face these challenges." He was admitted to the hospital after suffering a heart attack. While there were initial reports that the heart attack was triggered by a drug overdose, neither the rapper's family nor any of his reps have confirmed that DMX, and references to something that he has struggled with addiction in the past. As part of it, first, the rapper was still in a coma and breathing via a ventilator. So, wishing the family and himself a quick recovery. And so it's kind of like we have a little somber start with some amazing people that have passed, and with DMX in the hospital. And let's go. Mention Chris Cornell is one of the other amazing performers of that era and of our generation. Personally, what I think is probably one of the best vocalists, one of the top vocalists of all time. His voice was epic. We talked about this last week about the feud that's going on between the remaining Soundgarden members and Vicky Cornell, Chris's wife. Vicky Cornell. So this is out of Consequence of Sound. Vicky Cornell, her lawyer and band's ex-manager, hit back at Soundgarden members in latest legal spat. Vicky's lawyers claim the band wants to, quote, maliciously defame her and, quote, harass her children. So following the filing of legal papers earlier this week demanding Vicky relinquish the band's social media and website passwords, the surviving band members claim that Vicky has let Soundgarden's social media pages fall into disrepair. They said they've been locked out of the various social media accounts ever since go-between company Patriot Management gave Vicky the passwords in late 2019. It's the latest in a long-running legal dispute between Chris Cornell estate and Soundgarden. In a statement posted on the official Chris Cornell Instagram stories, former manager Ron Latifi Latif's appeared to side with Vicky Cornell's camp. Quote, during my 6 years working with Chris Cornell and Soundgarden, Chris and Vicky always controlled all of Soundgarden's social media accounts, both directly and through her own personal social media representative. At no time were any other members of Soundgarden involved, and this was true both before and after Chris died. Because of this, Soundgarden's attempt to seek an injunction in connection with the social media accounts is surprising to say the least. Vicky lawyer Marty Singer seconded Latif's understanding of the estate, stating that Vicky has been, quote, growing the band's social media accounts for some time and even accusing the band members of trying to defame Vicky and harass her children. I'll finalize here. The last quote. It's Ms. Cornell's forthcoming motion will expose the truth about the Soundgarden's supposed social media accounts. Ms. Cornell created the social media accounts, grew the accounts by allowing them to trade on Chris's then existing popular accounts, devoted her personal time and money in growing these accounts as Soundgarden displayed absolutely no interest in social media unless it was to promote their solo projects. Ms. Cornell has overseen these accounts for close to a decade. The fact that Soundgarden is unaware of the usernames and passwords for their alleged own accounts confirm their utter lack of involvement in creating, growing, and maintaining their alleged accounts. All right, so this goes on. It's something really interesting and brings to, the light of like who owns, the intellectual property or when it comes to social media. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Feel free to raise your hand or jump in.
That's a tough one. It's, especially if you have a social media account with, several different people posting on them. Are these sorts of things baked into Facebook terms of service that anyone knows about?
That's an interesting question because we've seen where people have made an error in judgment by hiring a company that said, we will grow your Facebook account, and they need admin privileges, and the unexpecting person doesn't realize that there are other levels of the account ownership to give, so you can allow for like Facebook advertising without giving them admin privileges. But the company or the person will say, hey, I need admin privileges. Then they'll take over the account and will then lock the person out of the accounts. And sometimes it's been a challenge for people to get those accounts back on those pages or things like that.
I was just going to say that, sometimes social media posting and social media accounts and web presence is one thing that an artist will outsource, like their legal affairs and maybe like their accounting. Artists will often outsource at least some of their social media responsibilities to someone who has more time and expertise in making the content that will actually grow their audience the way they would like to. And so I'm not sure if it's reasonable to say that because a musician doesn't necessarily have all their passwords, that they aren't necessarily in control of their intellectual property on that account, because I think that would be kind of like saying that the average person, because they hired a lawyer, if they didn't have an intimate knowledge of all the changes to tax code this year, that made them ignorant of their own legal proceedings. Well, that's why they hired a lawyer for that. So I'm not sure kind of how to respond to that. It's an interesting article.
Yeah, we have to get some lawyers in here to discuss this, because I'm sure there's been precedent set in some other cases, because I can't imagine this being the first time, and I don't imagine it being the last time. All right,
it's
so let's move.
One.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. So let's table this for a little bit. If we want to bring this back up momentarily, I just want to have another one here. So Variety, Bad Bobby breaks OnlyFans record by earning $1 million in 6 hours. All right, so with this article here, it talks about Teen Rat has captured the crown as queen of OnlyFans, claiming that she racked up more than $1 million in just 6 hours after her debut on the Not Safe for Work site. She's charging $23.99 per month for access to photos, videos on her OnlyFans pages. Subscribers are also promised the ability to, quote, direct message with this user. On a late post on Thursday, her Instagram account included a pic that apparently showed the total haul was just over $1 million, including $750,000 in change from subscriptions, $276,000 from direct DM payments and $5,000 in tips. Not bad for 6 hours, she wrote. We broke the fuck out of that OnlyFans record. Crazier than you think. DM me, the rapper says in her OnlyFans bio. I am on here every night responding. So the a spokesperson for OnlyFans confirmed she did earn more than $1 million. Prior to that, the record holder was Bella Thorne, who garnered more than $1 million in her first 24 hours back in August. And, so this is like, is this something that we started seeing conversions into, there's Cameo, there's other sites. I mean, OnlyFans, more adult content, but even going back a month or so, you've seen in the news, it's like, is OnlyFans something that is going to turn into more a PG version for musicians to use as another way of making money when it's, already people are already on the platform, they're using it, and they understand there is the economics behind it, as opposed to, hey, I want to stream a video on Twitch or that, like Facebook. Nobody's really going to pay for that unless there's advertising. You need a certain amount of views. So are we looking at, is this becoming a new platform for musicians to make extra revenue? And should I start my own OnlyFans?
I thought you already had yours.
I'm still trying to work on my BitClout.
I don't know. I think that every possible avenue out there that's open, to musicians to make something, there are going to be musicians that will give it a shot. And this just seems like something that someone's used and has had a little success with it, and see if it can be replicated.
It'll be really interesting. It's like a different kind. I mean, it's really built off like, what Patreon was, because Patreon had like, you can unlock here's photos, here's album covers, here's lyric sheets, here's, whatever it was. Patreon was more for that. It was more of a professional side with the recurring payments. OnlyFans was basically Patreon for, for more adult themed kind of content.
What I wonder is if it'll be able to get past the adult-themed label that it's been tagged with to reach mass audience. I mean, that's a label that's kind of hard to shake, especially when it's just so intertwined with the brand. Whether, I'm not sure, I don't know enough about OnlyFans to know whether they purposely tagged themselves with that or if that just was happenstance. But that'll be interesting to see if they can shake it to be more widely popular.
That will be really interesting. I mean, if we go back into the history of these platforms, I mean, YouTube originally was supposed to be a dating site. That was the original purpose of YouTube, to like put up videos, and it was to be a dating site. Let's think about that for a moment. Put it into perspective.
Or maybe not, because we all remember video dating services from back in the day.
Well, you can go to YouTube. Yeah, go to YouTube and type in like, 70s or 80s video dating services to see some of those classics that people were making with their home video recorder of the era.
That was funny. I've forgotten all about that.
Oh yeah, it's there. So right on. So let's move on. Gizmodo. So Spotify, because what's a day without Spotify? I think we should just have a Spotify. It's like, what did Spotify do today? Kind of segment.
The Spotify segment. We need a theme.
It's the Spotify segment because. So this one is in Gizmodo. So the title is Spotify's voice-controlled car thing device surfaces once again. And again, you can follow along with these headlines at musicindustrycity.com. There is an icon. There's an image that says Clubhouse Info Center. And if you click on that, it'll take you all the way through like where you can submit articles. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom, it shows you the show notes, and we have all the links in there. So everything we cover, we keep it going cumulative over the entire week. So this starts off. Spotify's long-rumored car thing device has emerged once again, this time in some iOS code. So Spotify first announced that it was testing a, quote, voice-controlled music and podcast device called Car Thing back in 2019. Spotify was pretty specific at the time that its, quote, focus remains on becoming the world's #1 audio platform, not on creating hardware. Though FCC filings from earlier this year certainly seem to indicate that Spotify has at least been been tinkering with the device's design, as the one of its 2019 mock-up looked different than the one depicted in the FCC filing images. Additionally, language contained in the confidentiality filing stated that the company had, quote, spent substantial effort in developing this product, and it is one of the first of its kind in the industry. Having the subject information easily available to competition would negate the advantage that they have achieved by developing this product. Not protecting the details of the design would result in financial hardship. While possibly a mere formality, the request certainly reads like the company had indeed invested heavily in the Car Thing's development. So this goes on. It's originally the Car Thing was available as a limited test with a, quote, small group of premium Spotify users who were invited to participate. The company said in 2019 that it was to develop it was developed to, quote, to help us learn more about how people listen to music and podcasts, but also noted that other products like Voice Thing or Home Thing could similarly be developed to understand how subscribers use its platform. Data sharing, data collection, data analytics, and this is, Pandora was, first to, was one of the first apps, to start getting into like Fords when they made that deal with Ford way back when, of course, we had Sirius and we had the satellite radios in there already. Any thoughts on this? It's another day, another Spotify article. And if anybody has any thoughts, feel free to raise your hand, chime in at any time. We're going to move on to, this is out of Polestar. The UK government unveils list of pilot events to bring back audiences. So they announced, UK government announced a series of pilot events across different genres of live music and live entertainment in order to gather scientific data and stay on track with its roadmap out of lockdown. The UK is still aiming for a lifting of all restrictions on social gatherings by June 21st, which would mark step number 4 in a 4-step reopening schedule. So they're looking to have this open by June 21st, summer. The most prominent events of the pilot scheme may be 2 soccer matches, both taking place at London's Wembley Stadium, the EFL Cup final April 25th, which is said to have 8,000 supporters, and the FA Cup semi-final April 18th, hosting an audience of 4,000. Venues participating in the program will test settings specific to the event and venue in order to gather data and best practices, including different approaches to social distancing, ventilation, and test on entry protocols. For the World Snooker Championships, which are part of the pilot program, because this is important, World Snooker Championships, I have to make sure I'm there for this. April 17th through May 3rd, the famous Crucible in Sheffield, England, will test a theater setting, for example. So what they're saying is attendees will be required to take a test before and after the event, adhere to an agreed code of behavior at the point of ticket purchase, and give consent acknowledging the risk associated with attending a pilot event. The article goes on to more details about this, but we're going to wrap up with the initial list of pilots are April 16th, the Hot Water Comedy Club in Liverpool, 300 people. That's indoor. April 8th, the FA Cup semifinal, Wembley, 4,000 people. Goes on. There's 10K runs over in Hatfield Park. There's a business event. There's the Circus nightclub in Liverpool with 3,000 people. The FA Cup in Wembley Stadium with 21,000 people. So that's what they're looking at as these tests, the pilot. So this is going to be really interesting to see how this rolls out, what kind of data they get from it. And continue.
I'm super curious to see this data once it comes out, because I'm really anxious to see live concerts return safely. So I'm really curious to see what turns out from this.
Yeah, exactly. And we're still waiting to see what's happening in the States, because when we have those shows, that the concerts, and with Texas opening, it's like it's around that time. I think we've hit the 2-week. We're coming up on the 2-week mark when we should start seeing these results. And are they, is it going to be buried in the news because they might be good and they don't want to seem like overreacting, or they want to prove a point? So we're going to see how the news and the media covers those reports. And
recently, too, Barcelona held a 5,000 person concert, and those stats should be coming back soon to see how that turned out. They did rapid testing at the gate, so there should be some information returning soon for us so that we can see what we can see.
Yeah, and the difference in that was when people tested positive, they were just turned away and given a refund. Whereas Byron Bay in Australia, one person tested positive in the area and they shut it down. The government forced the cancellation of the festival. But it also ties into the fact that the person was traveling from another area of Australia, which had a little break. There was a little breakout going on. So, one person gives it to two people, and then they give it to two people, and they give it to two people. So it's interesting to see how different countries are responding differently when it comes to these kind of, when it comes to live and the number of tests on positive. So I'm looking forward to these research, and hopefully it is good. With that being said, continuing into UK, Glastonbury, this is in Music Week. Glastonbury receives 900,000, and that's in pounds, in latest round of Culture Recovery Fund grant. So the Culture Secretary, Oliver Dowden, has announced details for over 2,700 organizations being offered nearly £400 million in grants and loans to help the culture and heritage section reopen and recover. It brings the government's total investment across grants, capital, and repayable finance from the Culture Recovery Fund so far to more than £1.2 billion across 5,000 individual culture and heritage organizations and sites. Glastonbury will receive £900,000 to help the festival continue in 2021 with two smaller events this year, as well as to carry the festival through 2022. A live stream takes place next month to raise funds for the festival. Glastonbury's festival, as Michael and Emily Eva said, we're extremely grateful to be offered a significant award from the Culture Recovery Fund. After losing millions from the cancellation of our last two festivals, this grant will make a huge difference in helping to secure our future. Comedy clubs, music venues, and multi-purpose stages continue to be supported in the latest round of funding awarded by the Arts Council England. Brighton venue Comedia, which usually programmed over 700 events a year, will receive over £123,000 to resume socially different music, comedy, and theater performances. It still does. It goes on to other venues and talks about the Roadhouse, the Brunel Social Club. So this is, again, in Music Week. You can find the link to all these articles in the show notes at musicindustrycity.com. Click on the Clubhouse Info Center icon. Scroll all the way down. So to wrap this up in a statement, Music Venue Trust said, quote, Music Venue Trust has worked hard to support eligible grassroots music venues in their application to this fund, and we are delighted that members of the Music Venues Alliance have now been awarded almost £16 million in support. This represents an 80% success rate for MVA members, many of whom had never applied for public funding prior to this pandemic. The money is aimed at securing venues until the end of June 2021. So it's interesting. It's tie-in together. I mean, this article goes into a lot more detail. It shows what venues have received and how much they have received in this help in the funding. And it's interesting that the funding, that's why I tied in the two articles. The previous one there is that the funding, they're saying, goes to June 21st, while the UK government has, their reopening schedule, they're looking at June 21st. So I think that's part of all the timing, and I guess they will revisit that as they get closer to that date. And finally, in the news, this is a little more for lighthearted. I like this. Do you remember Now? That's What I Call Music. Does anybody remember those CDs?
Oh, yes. I had the very first one. I remember it.
It's this one's in Rolling Stone. Who listens to Now That's What I Call Music in 2021? Even in the streaming era, the long-running hits compilation series maintains a passionate fan base. If Damien Gandia had to rank his three favorite installments of Now That's What I Call Music franchise, it would go Now 10, Now 64, and Now 57. Probably with Now 10, it's amazingly a nostalgia thing, even though the 14-year-old from New Jersey wasn't born yet when it was released in 2002. The 10th installment of the long-running pop hits compilation, which starts with Britney Spears' Overprotected and ends with Nickelback's How You Remind Me, still brings back memories of music he heard as a kid. With Now 64, which featured Luis Fonsi's Despacito and Billie Eilish's Ocean Eyes, Gandia credits the top-notch sequencing. I don't even think there's a single problem with Now 64. As Now 57, Gandia says, it's essential because of the way it captures what he sees as a moment when pop music was at its peak, featuring Justin Bieber's Sorry, Ariana Grande's Focus, and Selena Gomez's Same Old Love. Though there are some notable omissions, he says, like Drake's Hotline Bling. So, this is, coming from a 14-year-old. Now what we call this was started by Virgin Records in the UK in 1983. 15 years later, across the Atlantic for an inaugural American edition that included Spice Girls, Say You'd Be There, Hanson's Bop, and Aqua's Barbie Girl. That's 2000s now regularly topped U.S. charts. And there's a nice graph in here, that the chart that shows all this. So it's an interesting article to say, like, these are the type of things. And if you remember, and I remember, it would be like the first 4 tracks were like real top charts, top songs, and then the remaining, whatever it was, 15 songs were always kind of like the deep cut on somebody's album. So this reference decades later, the article goes on, even as album sales have cratered, now That's What I Call Music has held onto a passionate fan base, albeit a small one. Both Now 77, the most recent installment, and Now 73 debuted on the Rolling Stone Top 200 Albums chart at 159 and 104, respectively. So it's really interesting to see, like, they're talking to go back, Now critics who listens. He says that even with endless playlists available on the streaming services, Now offers something unique in the way it brings everything together. As dumb as it sounds, this is a quote, as dumb as it sounds, it's kind of changed my life, he says. It provided me with a different format for listening to music. It's a phenomenon that deserves to be recognized. So it's their Jen's the chief operating officer Jerry Cohen says the franchise has, quote, a very loyal group of fans, but it's hard to sketch a typical member since the series attracts a wide demographic. There are Gen Z kids like Gandia, people who grew up with the franchise in the late 90s, and older listeners too. So it's really interesting. I mean, it's still popular, and even this day and age of playlists, and everybody can create a playlist, and 1 billion playlists being created daily on Spotify. It's really interesting to see that people are still listening to something like this.
I just found Now 1 through 10 at my parents' house, actually, which was quite a fun discovery because I remember taking it to school, the first Now, because we could bring music to class. And I think that's the one that's Harvey Danger, Flagpole Sitta, which is an amazing song. And otherwise, I would have never discovered that song that young, that easily.
That was kind of how that franchise was for me too when I was younger, because my mom didn't really let us listen to pop music on the radio. And so of course, like Peter said, the first 3 cuts would be awesome, huge hits. And then I would just kind of discover the whole rest of the album, and I would buy them all from Columbia House mail
Yeah,
order
you had like
records.
the hip hop, R&B, like little section, and then it would go into the rock, and then it'd get like hard rock. Like it was funny because I was looking at this like songs in the back, and I was like, wow, they really did it like really good job with these actually.
That's exactly how I remember it when I was working at a music store. Even it's just stuff that you wouldn't get exposed to otherwise. But I feel like this is like the CD version of the last Blockbuster or something.
Or like, a different version of the annual Grammy nominees compilation CD that used to come out all the time from Columbia House also.
Yeah, and it's like the thing, and I didn't catch who said it, but maybe it was Lindsay. It was like you'd have pop, you'd have rock, you'd have hip hop, you'd have all these different styles compiled into one. So it wasn't catering to any particular genre. It was just catering almost to the average listener in a sense, and
Masses.
introducing them to different music, and not even just saying here's the number 1 songs, here's the single releases off each album. Now, whether that was due to they didn't that was an intentional, that they said we don't want to put all the top single releases on it and just make it a greatest hit CD of that era, or they wanted to intentionally put deep cuts into it, or was it a licensing where, because they have to license it, was it they were getting a cheaper licensing rate for the deeper cuts as opposed to the singles?
I'm guessing they probably cut a deal with the labels and agreed to put a certain number of tracks from the label on the compilation, maybe. I don't know. Just a guess.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know that actually. Do some Now research.
So it's a little bit of slow news day today, and not a lot of excitement. It is Monday. It's from the holiday weekend. Does anybody have something that they would like to chime in about? If there's something we missed, if you saw something in the news you want to bring to the table, throw it out there. I mean, you don't have to be an expert on it. You can say, "Hey, I saw this, and let's talk about it." Or if there's anything that we did cover, we talked about DMX. The
That was
Soundgarden,
my
Vicky
thing.
Cornell, Bad Barbie with Bad Barbie, with OnlyFans, Spotify's voice control cart thing, and Pulsar with the UK government unveils list of pilot events to bring back audiences, and Glastonbury, and along with numerous other venues receiving over Glastonbury received over 900 million pounds, and then they sent out over 1.2 billion pounds in relief fund to lots of venues. And again, you can find all this on musicindustrycity.com. If you just click on where it says Clubhouse, Clubhouse Info Center. Sorry, I made the graphic, so it's Clubhouse Info Center. You can click on that. It shows you where you can submit questions during our shows, and also where you can submit an article. And as well as, if you scroll down, it'll have all the show notes where there's resources and links to these articles in the headlines.
Where are
And
the US? Oh, sorry, you can go.
I was just going to say, for Clubhouse iOS users, you can also touch Peter's picture to get to his bio, scroll down, and there is a link. It's a bit.ly link where you can type that into your browser, and you can look at all of these articles and the links to these articles in depth also.
I actually took that out this morning. I accidentally took it out, and I was like, I have to go live. So what
So
you
now
can
I'm
do?
a fibber.
It's at the top. If you look at the top one, it says Music Industry City show notes and question submission form. So that has the link. That's the direct link. So it's musicindustrycity.com/clubhouse. And yeah, I totally forgot to tell you, because I was cleaning it up because I edited
Womp womp.
and I forgot to. Yeah, so I get a. Or wait, this is for me. I give myself a boo.
Oh no.
So, but yeah, you can go there, and I will put it back in because I was accidentally deleted it, and I was like, oh, but I just close it out, go, and I got to run to the studio. So, I have a question to pass around because we were talking about listening to CDs. Loretta, you're in the Gen Z demographic, and where do you discover music? Like, I mean, do you even know what now? Now this is music. This is what I call music. Or like, are you familiar with that? And like, where do you find music? Like playlists or just Spotify, friends, YouTube?
I love having this conversation. I've had this conversation so many times, and people always ask me because I'm Gen Z. So I had Now This Is Music, Now This Is All Music, whatever, like 22 or something. The one with like Chain Hang Low and like fucking, I don't know, like that kind of realm. And I remember I got it when I was like 6 or 7, and there was a lot of rap on it, and there were a lot of swears, and like I was like listening to it. My mom was like, no. So she took the CD, gave it to my dad, and my dad like like he must have went on like Napster or something, I don't know, and he found clean versions of like all of the songs. So then she gave me like a burnt CD with the same songs on it, but they were all clean. So I had to listen to that for a while. But no, one topic that I really like discussing is the difference between like album listening and single listening, because like for me, I got Spotify in like 2014. And that's where I started discovering literally all of my music. Like my dad, like prior to that, my dad had like this like Dell iPod from like 2001 that could hold like 30,000 songs. And it was always like classic rock and like the Austin Powers soundtrack and like shit like that. So I was listening to that up until like 2014. And then, well, actually, no, when I was like 11, I started buying stuff on iTunes. So like 11 and 14, I was using iTunes, and then 14 on, I was using Spotify, but I never really listened to albums. And I still don't really listen to albums because the way that we consume music, like I've had this conversation with like older folk and back in the day, it was like, you know, you hear a song on the radio you like, you go and buy the album, and you have to listen to the whole album until it gets to the song that you like. So you end up listening to the whole album, right? Instead of just like, I mean, there's like 78s too, or like the little records as opposed to the big ones. I don't know. 45s. And so like, but still there usually be more than one song on that. But most of the time you'd find yourself buying a full album just to listen to one song, and you'd end up consuming the whole album. And then people became fans of the whole albums. But now there's just singles, you know, like if I want to hear like Breakfast in America off fucking Breakfast in America, I just look up the album and I go to that song, and then I listen to that song, and then that's it. Like I add that song to a playlist. I don't have to listen to the whole album just to get to that song. So I find myself consuming singles as opposed to albums, which I am honestly kind of regret that. Like I wish I was more into albums, but
Look, can I ask you a question on this? The way, because you know, the single market, it goes actually back to the disco era when it was singles, and you know, people would be like, of course, albums were still big, but you know, it was a singles. It turned into a singles market at that point for a short period of time. When you listen, what I have found, and I don't know if this is just because you know I'm old and my brain doesn't remember things as much anymore, but I can talk about albums and everything about those albums, and I can name the track listing to every album. And as years went down, going along, as we slipped away, you know, moved away from the iPod. I mean, I have like 3 iPods, and it's like they're whatever my catalog is on there, it's almost a time capsule of that period of my life. So it's really interesting to go back to it. But here's the thing, as time has moved on, I've heard such great music by a band, but I don't find that I can remember the names of the songs, or it's like you just listen so quickly and you're like, wow, that's a great song. You throw it into a playlist. Do you find that you don't retain a lot of the information about the music? Like you're like, oh, I know that song, but I might not know who it is, or I might not know the name of the song if I do know who it is. Or do you find that there is still, you do absorb that?
No, I'm definitely in that category of people who has an issue of like retaining specifics. I mean, if the song like really, really hits, you know, like if I'm adding it to a playlist and I'm like taking the time to add it to a playlist and I listen to that playlist often, then I can name the song, you know. And depending on the discography, like I don't know, like the Black Keys, the Beatles, like I know their entire discography. So if you play a song, I will name it in like 0.2 seconds. But like if there's like songs like that, like just like I like this one song from this one artist or this one band, like it takes a while for me to like recognize like, I mean, I get the name of the song, but like the artist, it takes a while for me to recognize.
Right. I mean, there's so many good
I'm
songs.
the same way.
I'm curious to know, like, to what degree that relates to like our dependence on digital devices, because I know for myself, I used to remember 100 people's phone numbers, and now I think I remember like 12 people's phone numbers because my phone has all of that. And I'm wondering to what degree we're depending on our digital devices and things and services like Shazam to discover this music, and we don't have to retain that information because our devices and our apps do it for us. I'm just kind of curious if anybody has thoughts on that.
Well, that's like, I 110% agree on that. Like in terms of like information retention, like I like going to phone numbers. Like I had like 4 or 5 friends' phone numbers memorized when I was a kid because I had a landline and I didn't get a cell phone until I was 13. So I had all those memorized, and now I don't, like my best friend, like I don't know her fucking phone number. Like I have no idea. It's just in my phone, you know?
Well, I always get the, you know, I get tripped up when it says, all right, enter the last 4 digits of your phone number. I'm like, I have to think about that for a moment.
Yeah. And like, like there's a lot of stuff like that. Like, and like, I think especially with music, that's also a thing. Like, I need all information really that like all like analog information is now digital. So like, you don't have to think about it or worry about it really. It's just like sort of there. And like, you kind of just access it as needed instead of having to like, with an analog piece of information where you have to search for it and you're like holding it in your hand and you're looking at it. And like, I feel like that's another thing. Like for example, like I just made like for school, I just made like a business plan for like I plan on starting a label in like 5 years, but that's another story for another day. But I like mapped it all out on my computer, and like that's fine. But I printed it out so I have a physical copy, because for me, holding it in my hand and like seeing it on a piece of paper like is so much more, like it absorbs so much easier for me. And I feel like a lot of people are the same in that respect. I mean, I could be wrong, but like for me, just like having a physical analog piece of whatever it is like helps retain the information.
Right. So, this is fantastic. And if there's any marketers out there listening, or anybody should be paying attention, Loretta is basically the Gen Z poster child right now. And we are learning a lot about listening, consumer, engagement. And, these are things that we look at, look across the board of like how, Gen Z differs from millennials, differs from Gen X, but Gen X doesn't even exist. They just skip over to the boomers, because Gen X was never really marketed to that in a different, like millennials were so heavily marketed to based on different, applications and technologies, and Jamie, like, if is there something you want to chime in about? Because I mean, you've seen the different, from a publicist standpoint, and how we should just, marketing and talking and like saying, I need to, for this album release, like how has like that storyline changed from 20 years ago putting out a press release to today?
Well, I think Gen X, we listen a little more than talk.
What?
So I think, and I prefer to listen because I learn a lot more. But, as far as marketing and changing like themes in marketing, I feel like you have to go with the flow of what's going on now. Now it's a singles market. It's not an artist market. Like, or, we don't have the gods we had before. And, one song to another, I can't tell who it is lately. And it makes me feel like, the old lady shaking my fist at the sky and telling the kids to get off my lawn. But we had rock stars. They don't have them anymore. And I'm complete now, Peter.
You did that on purpose. You just made Eli. Yes, Eli just cringed a little bit. A little piece of Eli died inside. Anybody else want to chime in on this particular topic? It's very interesting. We also talked about DMX. We talked about Vicky Cornell with Soundgarden, Bad Barbie, and Babby with OnlyFans, Spotify again in the news. This is a voice-controlled car thing device. Polestar UK government list of pilot events to bring back to audience, and Glastonbury and Ultra Culture Recovery funds to help venues stay afloat through this. And if there's anything that you might have seen in the news that we didn't touch upon today, bring it to the table. We have about 8 minutes left in the News Power Hour.
I wasn't here for the Chris Cornell thing, but I've worked with Susan Silver, and she's pretty amazing. She's Cornell's ex and has a daughter, Lily, with him. What was that about? Sorry.
This one is Vicky Cornell. There was a legal spat that's been going on, and this week I talked about this last year. Lindsay, please keep the microphone muted. I hear a lot of background noise that's popping in and out. Until you're ready to speak, please. Thank you. This has been going on that last week was talked about that the remaining Soundgarden members feel like they've been locked out of their social media accounts and everything. And then she's now claiming the band wants to maliciously defame her and harass her. They said they've been locked out of various social media accounts ever since the go-between company Patriot Management gave Vicky the passwords in late 2019. This is a long ongoing thing. So the lawyers are saying, Ms. Cornell's forthcoming motion will expose the truth. forth about their supposed social media accounts. She's their statement, sum it up, is like saying she's run all the accounts, and so it was her and Chris, and the band didn't want anything to do with them unless it was they wanted to promote their own solo careers. So they shouldn't be entitled to any of
How are
this.
they supposed to move on? Like, I think if they wanted to move on as a band, I could see them getting it back. But, moving on as solo artists, make your own and make your own pages and then Facebook ad and target the people in that group.
And it's like there's also about like I think maybe just still going back to like who owns catalog, what's the members. It's all part of like a bigger picture, a bigger fight because Chris Cornell's estate, who owns all everything. And I think it goes even deeper than that. And who owns, like, here's the question is, and we brought this to the table and we'd love if there was a lawyer in the house, is just, who owns the social media accounts? I mean, unless there's a piece of paper signed, who owns the accounts?
Peter, I thought of something interesting the other day, that somebody should have a job that sells afterlife insurance where, like, after you die, someone manages all those accounts. So I don't know. I mean, there should be something like that.
Well, isn't that like, putting into like, the trust, the state, and the lawyer in that sense? I haven't had to deal with any afterlife or catalog.
I don't know, but there needs to be something.
Well, I know in terms of copyright, and like it would be interesting if we could get copyright incorporated with social media. In terms of music copyright, the copyright is the life of the creator plus 75 years. But it would be interesting if we could, like, I'm sure at some point there's going to be a way that incorporates copyright into social media based on like following and whatnot. But yeah, I know for music, it's the life of the creator plus 75 years. If that's helpful at all.
Yeah, it's life plus 70, just as a minor note there. But and they keep changing that because here's the other question is, unpublished works is not known, still may be copyrighted after 120 years. It's like there's all these, but there's different errors of different copyright laws, and in different countries there are different copyright laws. So it's like, is it the global copyright? Is it trademark? It's so much to unpack. I say we just burn the whole suitcase. All right, as we wrap up, any final thoughts on today?
I had a question actually about what the current status was in the US with funding for venues. With all of that, with the bill that passed, because I know someone recently was saying how, I think it was Randy was in here, and everyone else was commenting how no money had been seen after you brought up the UK.
I'll take a look into the news to see if there are any updates, and I can report back on that tomorrow's show.
Yeah, I was just curious about that, and also with the awareness or basically attention span thing. It's absolutely anyone who uses a screen. It's actually like a neurological thing after we've all been, unless you actually don't have like any type of a screen and utilize it, which is a very rare thing. All of our attention spans and our memory and all of that has basically formed around that. So that's why none of us can remember song names and all of these things, because it's happened to all of us. And I feel like there was one more thing that I was waiting to say, but it's all good.
All right, so it's not that I shouldn't feel that bad. I'm not getting that old yet.
No, it's all of us, unless we're all getting old, which technically we are, I guess. But no, it's actually just it's getting worse though by the generation, which is interesting because even with like a vinyl resurgence and all of that, it's still really bad because it's everything. It's not just little things like remembering song titles.
Well, going with the vinyl resurgence, they did. We covered it last week. I have to dig it up again. I can't remember the exact statistic, but they were saying that out of the millennials, that I think it was 63% bought a physical product and have never listened to it.
That was my question. It's actually about to be how many of them have actually listened to it or ever taken it out of the packaging and not just put it on their wall?
Well, we did. We did discuss here recently how cassette tapes are making a comeback, and as we all know,
yeah.
cassette tapes are not for audiophiles, and the kind of resurgence in cassette tapes is happening as almost a souvenir. It's not
been
something.
around for a bit, I thought.
It's
actually.
yeah, it's not something. Well, I believe Lady Gaga just sold out her cassette run.
So like a mainstream thing. Yeah, because I remember at a South by this awesome, I think they're from Japan, I believe, DYGL. They barely spoke any English except one of them, and they just handed me this cassette, and they were like super hipster, like, you know, Japanese, like street style kids that were like rock and roll and awesome. Super cool. And I was like, ooh, a cassette. This is so hip. Like, and this was like, you know, back when, what's the label that's not a label anymore that had all the bad stuff come out? That was all cassettes.
All
right. So I just want to start wrapping up. We do have just about 2 minutes left here. So and Taj, Elliot,
just to touch on what was brought up a moment ago, the Save Our Stages funds, the SVOG shuttered venue operator grants, the applications have just trickled out from the Small Business Association, from the federal government. So nobody's really gotten that money yet. The process has just really started. Nobody, people are still figuring out the application. There are some problems with the application. They're lobbying now to get some modifications to the wording on the application because some groups have been excluded for, sort of technical reasons. So that money hasn't started to flow yet.
Oh, thanks for that update.
Elliot.
Yeah, thanks for that update. And Elliot, if there's some, if you have that info, if there's an article, if you want to just ping it to me, and I'll research it and so find out a little bit more for tomorrow's news.
I will reach out to you. I don't have any actual articles, but
Okay.
I am on an email chain from one of the gentlemen who's part of the lobbying process, and he's been keeping people up to date on the process. So I'll forward some of those. I'll get your email and forward some of that stuff to you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Then we can say inside source reports that.
Womp womp. Right?
All right.
Taj, you had your hand up, and I think you had something to say really quickly as we're
Yeah.
wrapping up this News Power Hour.
Yeah, I'm putting 5 on the clock.
I got excited about cassette tapes. I just ordered because I have this old. My grandpa used to record nature sounds in Michigan, and I have this. I bought this cassette tape this thing at Goodwill to be able to play it and play it in reverse, which is really cool, and it sounds really grainy. And I also got. I ordered a tape recorder, and I'm gonna be looking on the market for weird, I don't.
DM me. I want to talk more about weird
All right.
sound things.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, it's a big interesting thing, with the cassette sales being up since the highest since 2003. We've had more cassette sales this year than in 2003. Well, in 2020 that is, and 2021 is continuing. I mean, Lady Gaga has a cassette out there, and 8-tracks still exist.
Oh my God, really?
Yes, they do.
I still live in my building.
St. Vincent released
so they said 8-track.
And yeah, so basically, it's 8 tracks, not 8-track. 8-track. What a great producer. All right, Eli, we're going to wrap up. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks everybody for jumping up on the stage and offering up your thoughts and opinions and everything and helpful information. Again, musicindustrycity.com. You can register there for free. You can also, there is a nice little graphic that says Clubhouse Info Center, and in there you can submit a question during the shows. So if there's one of the shows we have and you might not want to come to the stage, you can submit a question there. The host will get it. Also, if you come across a news article that you think, hey, this would be really interesting, you can submit it there as well. It's a quick little form, just like copy, paste, go. And if you scroll down, you'll see the Clubhouse show notes. So all the articles that we cover in the News Power Hour is put in there. We update it just before the show. If there are articles we kind of pick up during the show, it'll be updated within an hour after the show. We'll refresh that, and we keep that as a running list until Friday. Then every Monday we refresh that list. So you can bookmark that, check it out every day to see your curated source of news. And Eli, any final thoughts?
I just want to say thank you so much to Loretta and Elliot and Taj, Brian, Devin, Lindsay, and everybody who contributed to the conversation today. This really piqued my interest with cassette tapes and singles and memory loss over generations with the use of devices. This was a really interesting conversation. Thanks so much, and thank you to everybody
Selective
tuning in.
memory. It's
Selective memory. Like selective
Right.
hearing.
Right on. All right, everybody, have a great Easter Monday, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Peter.